Welcome to Media Melanie Talks TV. I'm Melanie, and today I'm back to talk about We Were Liars Season 1 on Prime Video. All 8 episodes of this book adaptation are now available to stream, and yes, it is based on the 2014 book by E. Lockhart, and this is now the 3rd show the creators have teamed up on. Julie Plec and Karina McKenzie have also worked together on the originals, and Roswell, New Mexico, both on the CW. And the way this video is going to work, first I'm going to get into a spoiler-free review so you can determine whether or not this show is worth your time. Then I will get into the big twist, all of the spoilers, and discuss what worked, what didn't work, and just my overall thoughts. This is an amnesia thriller starring Emily Alyn Lind. I did not realize this until I looked up her IMDb, but she actually played a young Amanda Clark in the show Revenge, which I was obsessed with. And interestingly, this show feels like it wants to be the show Revenge, mixed with a little bit of Cruel Summer Season 1, and then really reaching here, but feels like it wanted to get to White Lotus status, and it just never did. And then too, The Summer I Turned Pretty is coming out next month. It almost gives a little bit of those vibes, just given that they are in a Massachusetts vacation destination. In the case of We Were Liars, though, it is called Beechwood Island, a private island owned by American royalty, the Sinclair family. And because it does combine all these elements of other shows, I feel that it somehow doesn't establish enough of a connection to these characters or find its own footing to give itself kind of more of a unique vibe. I mean, Cruel Summer Season 1, they literally had a character who was lighter haired in the first part of the season and then turned darker haired brunette for the second half. And obviously we saw that. And because the show has 2 timelines, of course, that is an easy visual differentiator when you're trying to work between 2 timelines, which in this case are only 1 year apart. So from that aspect, yes, it worked, but something else interesting about how this was adapted from the book. It did keep the same twist, but apparently they wanted to develop the adult timeline a little bit more to create more generational interest, which it worked because I don't think that these young actors could necessarily carry this entire show themselves. However, in doing that and developing the adult timeline more, I did not like any of these sisters. They proved time and again to be whiny and entitled, and I didn't really care enough about their storyline. I was much more vested in Cadence's storyline and how she ended up where she did and exactly who put her there. Now, I took a very interesting watching approach for this show, something that I never do. I got to episode 4 and I found myself looking at the watch thinking, okay, what's next? When is this episode going to end? I started watching the previously on and then the last 5 to 10 minutes of episodes 5, 6, and 7. And then I dove straight into the finale, episode 8. And let me tell you, I was able to figure things out okay. I didn't miss much, and I was still able to feel the very big impact of the twist, which I did not see coming. I appreciated the twist. I think it was very smart, and I'm not going to get into what it was yet, but all I will say is that it's a twist we've seen before, and while this one has a slightly different take, I think the twist will make it more interesting to potentially, for at least me, to go back and rewatch some of it. But they do give us a couple of flashbacks to give us the context of exactly what that twist meant in terms of this story. Now, this is something, like I said, I never do. It's interesting because I consider myself to be generally a TV completionist. I don't know if it's the OCD in me or just pressure, feeling like I have to finish a series once I start it. And I will say, once I've started covering TV shows here and doing videos on them, I've definitely had to be more intentional and let some shows go if I'm not feeling them. So I could have just done that here, but I was intrigued. And because I didn't read the book, I had no idea what was happening. I didn't Google it. And I was pleasantly surprised by the last episode. So all I'm really trying to say here is this season could have been less episodes. Honestly, I'm thinking it probably could have been a solid 5 episodes. They could have fit more stuff in, and the twist still would have had that same type of impact. Now, things I liked about the show, I think it had really nice set design. It did a great job creating this high society American royalty vibe. They leaned a lot into the fairy tale allegory of it all, and I think they probably could have scaled back on that a little bit as well. But the cinematography was vibrant, the colors were nice. It's definitely a good summer watch. It feels like you're on summer vacation on this private island with this family who is very privileged. And did anybody else kind of get an Ella Purnell vibe from the brunette Cadence? I don't know. Every time I looked at her, I was like, who does she remind me of? But yes, I think it is Ella Purnell. All right, before I get a little bit more into this review, please go ahead, hit that like button, subscribe to my channel. I am covering some other shows, including The Buccaneers on Apple TV+. If you want something young and fun and scandalous and yearning, highly recommend it. It's now on its second season, and I'm going to be here with multiple videos per week covering that. I'm also finishing up Poker Face on Peacock, which is a really fun case of the week style mystery featuring Natasha Lyonne. And then coming up next month, I will be covering The Institute on MGM+. So if you like this sort of young thriller type of show, The Institute feels a lot like a darker Stranger Things and almost a little bit of Harry Potter thrown in there as well, and it's adapted from a Stephen King book, so don't miss that. And I will also be covering the aforementioned The Summer I Turned Pretty Season 3 coming to Prime Video. And again, if this show is kind of your thing, you might also like The Summer I Turned Pretty. There's not quite the level of thriller, horror, and scandal and all of that, but there is a love triangle that is just pure fire. So overall, before I get into the spoilers, yeah, the show was entertaining enough. And that said, now that you know how I've watched it and I didn't actually watch every single episode, I'm not encouraging you to do the same, but I am curious if you end up watching it. Please do come back in the comments and let me know what your watch strategy was and whether or not you enjoyed this. Or if you're watching this just to see if it is worth your time, what do you think? Did I give you enough information to make the decision to watch it or not? Either way, drop it in the comments and let me know. So getting into the spoilers of it all, I'm going to give you a minute to step away in case you did not watch it and you do not want to know this twist. 5, 4, 3, 2. All right, you guys. Cadence's cousins and Gat, they were dead the entire time. These kids decided to literally burn down their family estate, which is interesting because Cadence was going to be the sole heir to everything. Cadence is out here visiting on her summer 17 following summer 16, which ended tragically, and she can't remember anything. And there's a reason why. First of all, she's taking all these pills so she can forget. And then when she does remember, she has this sort of attack, and it's like the weight of the grief. She just cannot withstand it. So once I found that out, first of all, I should say, I thought the twist was going to be that the dogs died, and I was super sad. As an animal person, I own 2 dogs and a cat. I was devastated. The poor dogs. And that was giving a little bit of This Is Us vibes when, spoiler alert, Jack runs back into the fire to save the dogs, and then, of course, that ends up giving him a heart attack that kills him. And ironically, Cadence is the only one that escapes this fire. The guilt must be killing her, especially once she finally figured it out. And I've got to say, I think they did a good job of playing this as the kids being dead. I mean, yes, it was very Sixth Sense, and we've seen this they were dead the whole time thing before, but in retrospect, it did make me want to go back and watch some of it. And as I mentioned, they did do us that favor of providing a couple of scenes where Cadence was with her dead cousins and Gat, and then her mom came and checked on her, and she's like, oh, I'm fine. And when we're seeing it this time around, it's just her sitting there all by herself. So well done in terms of that. But overall, I will say, I didn't necessarily love Cadence's acting. I also didn't love her season 1 hair, which I think was probably a wig. But either way, that's neither here nor there. And I guess while we're talking about hair, I didn't love Mirren's shorter haircut either. And I think some of these young actors just, they don't have a lot of experience. They're still finding their footing. So, you know what? It's fine. I just think that they didn't quite build maybe enough chemistry and give us enough connection to these characters to really become super vested in their storyline. And as I mentioned, they did give the adults more storyline, but Did anybody else just not like the moms? And the one thing I think that maybe I did miss, at one point, Johnny's mom says, was this karma for something we did in summer 16? What did the moms do in summer 16? If I missed it, please drop it in the comments and let me know. But I'm also wondering, is that something where they're potentially planting a seed for a second season where maybe they do a flashback of the moms in summer of 16? I'm not sure if this one will come back for a second season. It's not billed as a miniseries or a limited series, and the creators have alluded to the fact that yes, there could potentially be more story for more seasons, but after watching this one, I'm not sure exactly how they would build upon this idea, especially once we know the twist. And the good thing about watching episode 8 and skipping all the rest is they do a pretty good job of explaining everything. You find out that Harris is racist. He doesn't want Cadence and Gat to end up being together, which ended up making it really meaningful when Ed did return at the end and Cadence gave him this big hug and said, "I'm glad you're here." I loved to see that. And then Gat gave her those beads that she's wearing, which obviously are much more meaningful than the pearls, which she had gone back into the house for, and that is what made Gat come in after Cadence and led to his death. There were some funny lines in there when they're like, hey, we don't know how to do arson, when they're sort of planning this arson situation. They're all drinking. And how do they even come up with this? And I don't know, this is just me, but if I was part of a family like that, I don't think I would ever have the nerve to burn down the family estate and legacy. Like, why would you do that, especially if you're going to inherit it? I understand, okay, morally, maybe they didn't like what the family stood for. They wanted to kind of burn the moms who were always in competition with their dad to be the best sister and have the best kids and heirs standing in line for the family fortune. But I was surprised that they made that move. It seemed like a pretty fast jump, but hey, at the same time, I did skip a few of the episodes, so maybe it wasn't so fast after all. But I think my favorite part of this episode was actually the ending. When Cadence and the liars jump into the water, they turn into younger kids, and then Cadence kind of pops up on her own, which is symbolic of leaving the past and leaving the ghosts of her cousins behind. Now that she's had the realization that they were dead the entire time, and she can actually work on accepting that and forgiving herself. I think that's important. And interestingly, she decided not to contribute to the family story. Her grandfather knows exactly what she did. He's not going to throw her under the bus because you know what? The Sinclairs don't get involved with scandal. So she declines on that interview. And really, it seems like she wants to start anew and write her own story. I will say there were some pretty solid needle drops throughout these episodes as well. Hosier, Carole King, Gracie Abrams. But my favorite, probably the Cranberries Linger cover, which was in episode 4. I'm a sucker for music and TV shows, and I do think they did it well here. So in terms of favorite episode, definitely the finale. They wrap everything up. You get all of the context you need, even if you didn't necessarily pay attention to some of the earlier episodes. And I do think they could have done this in fewer. I think this would have been perfect at 5 episodes. My least favorite episode was probably episode 4 because that was my breaking point and when I decided, you know what, I'm just gonna go and do the skip ahead method, which I may or may not employ again. And to my recollection, I don't think I've ever done this with the show before. As I mentioned, I am a completionist, so I tended to complete things, but I do need to be more intentional with my time. So many shows, only so many hours in the day. But yeah, I do think this one maybe stretched it out a little bit much and got repetitive. Okay, we get it. It's a fairy tale. The Sinclairs are American royalty, kings, queens, castles, all that jazz. Just a little bit too much of it. Now, if you've read the book, maybe you got more out of this than I did, or perhaps you're like, okay, as usual, the book is better. And I am curious for any of the book readers out there, what did you think? Please drop it in the comments and let me know. Is this one that maybe it's worth reading the book afterwards? I don't know because I always appreciate the twist and the surprise, and now knowing what it is, I don't know if it will really have that same sort of gripping impact as it would reading it the first time and not knowing. And not knowing was great because, like I said, I know this is obviously based on a book. I didn't Google it to get the answers. Instead, I decided to watch the finale, and I still feel pretty confident with that methodology. As Cadence said at the end, liars are forever. And who knows, maybe this series will end up coming back for more and we'll get more content from the liars, or I guess we should say the liar, because Cadence is the only one left. And then we've still got the moms and the littles. Now, will they develop that into more? The adult storyline didn't necessarily thrill me, and I get it, they were trying to create more interest for people of my age, not just the young adult viewers, but I do think it missed the mark, but at the same time was necessary because I don't think the young adults necessarily carried all of their storyline with great strength either. So drop all your comments on We Were Liars Season 1 down in the comments. If you watched it, was it worth it? What did you think? Or did you just watch the whole video to get my take on it before you decided to watch the show? And in that case, will you watch the show, or was this sufficient enough to kind of give you the gist and then move on to your next watch of the summer? And I've got to say, I do think there are better summer watches out there, including the upcoming The Summer I Turned Pretty, the aforementioned The Buccaneers on Apple TV Plus, and if you're into the dark thrillers, you may like The Institute, which, as I mentioned, is coming to MGM Plus. You can just add that on right to your Prime subscription, and it stars Mary Louise Parker from Weeds, love her, and if you watched From on MGM Plus, it also stars Robert Joy, who played Victor's dad. So if you like the darkness, if you're into Stranger Things, keep The Institute on your radar. That one comes out July 13th, and I will also be covering Dexter Resurrection. Be sure to stick with me for more TV talk, and yes, I will be back again soon. Thank you so much for tuning in. Media Melanie, clicking off.